So we've already talked a lot about food webs and how they show us how matter and energy are moving through an ecosystem. Today we're just going to add another little piece to that, and that's some vocabulary that goes along with these ideas. So we're going to learn basically just two sets of words that refer to how energy moves through an ecosystem. And so actually the first two are really simple. So the first words we're going to learn are autotroph and heterotroph. And these words can be broken down in kind of their constituent word parts. So if you look at the word autotroph and heterotroph, you'll notice that they both have the word troph in common, or the word part troph in common. Troph just means food or energy, and then the term auto means self. So you can think about like an automobile is something that moves itself, something that's automatic, runs by itself. So auto means self. So autotroph literally translates to a self-feeder, something that can feed itself. A heterotroph, on the other hand, hetero means other. So this is something that feeds by eating other organisms. So when you go ahead and look at a food web, an autotroph is anything that feeds itself. So you can think about that as anything that doesn't need to eat something else. And the only organism in our food webs or food chains that we have are at the bottom there, our plants. Those are our autotrophs. I'm just going to put a little A. Because they're the only things that can feed themselves, or basically they make their own food. They make sugar by using the sun and photosynthesis. So they're the only self-feeders. Everything else is a heterotroph because those organisms eat other organisms. So if you think about this grasshopper, he is eating the grass, so he is a heterotroph because he's getting his energy from other organisms. Same thing with the frog here. The frog is getting his energy from the grasshopper, so he's getting his energy from another organism. The snake, the hawk. So autotrophs are the only example of those, will ever and always be your plants. Everything else, anything that eats, is a heterotroph. The only thing that you may get confused about is, say, well, what about like a Venus flytrap, a plant that eats bugs? Well, those plants don't eat to get energy. They actually eat to get nutrients. They eat to get matter. So those plants are still autotrophs in that they're making their own sugar. So those two words are pretty simple. And the next set of words are equally as simple. And they kind of match the words that we already learned. So the first one is producer. And the second is consumer. And so a producer is anything that makes. If you produce, you make things. Specifically, they make sugar. And this word is synonymous with autotroph because autotrophs are self-feeders, so they make sugars. So anything that's a plant, we can also put a P next to it because it is a producer in that it's making its own sugar. Now, consumer is anything that consumes sugar or eats other things to get its energy. It's taking energy out. The producers are making energy for the ecosystem. The consumers are taking the energy and they're turning it into heat, and then they're using it up. When you eat a sandwich, you get the sugar. You use that sugar to move around, to talk, to do all sorts of things. So you are a consumer of energy. So anything that's a heterotroph on our food chain is also going to be a consumer. The only difference is that when we mark our consumers, we mark what level they are. So our first, second, third, and fourth consumer, and we have names for them. So the first consumer in our food chain, the thing that eats the producer, is always called the primary consumer, because it's the first. So primary consumer. And then, obviously, if you're the next level in the food web, so our frog here, if you eat a primary consumer, you're considered a secondary consumer. Secondary consumer. And then if you're the third in a food chain, if you eat the secondary consumer, like the snake is, you are called a tertiary. TI. Tertiary. Tertiary. That's a Y. A tertiary consumer. And then if you eat the tertiary, you're technically called a quaternary. A fourth level consumer is quaternary consumer. But most of our food chains don't get up, so at this point I'll just let you write fourth level consumer. So fourth level consumer. So primary, secondary, and tertiary. And then again, we usually don't have anyone the fourth level up in this food chain. We do, but usually we run out of energy before we get that high. So these are the kind of just the vocab words that go around food chains and the energy that's in them. And what I'll have you do on a lot of questions is just label these organisms as such. So if you just remember this order, autotrophs are plants, everything else is a heterotroph, and plants are producers. If you eat a producer, you're a primary consumer. If you eat a primary consumer, you're a secondary consumer. You eat a secondary consumer, you're a tertiary consumer. There's one caveat to this, and that's when we look at a food web. Because in a food web, you could be more than one of these classifications when we're talking about producer and consumer. Or specifically when we're talking about our consumers and our level of consumer. So let me just show you a quick example of what that might be. So for example, this simple food web here, I can follow multiple food chains through, and we'll see how organisms have multiple classifications. So for example here, I'm just going to look at the leaf down here. This leaf in the bottom left is our producer, right? So if I follow this first food chain up to the mouse here, I'm going to see, well, the mouse is eating a producer, so that's going to make him a primary consumer. But let's say if I follow a different food chain, right? Let's say instead of following straight up to the mouse, I go first over to this grasshopper. Well, the grasshopper is eating the producer, so he's going to be my primary. And then if I follow the grasshopper up to the mouse, I'm also going to see that the mouse is also a secondary, because he's eating the grasshopper. That's a primary. So you can be more than one classification at a time. You just have to follow every food chain in your food web. So what I recommend is when students are labeling a food web, instead of just trying to guess, what you do is you use different colors, and so you follow each food chain. So I might follow my first chain up to the mouse, so the mouse is a primary, the fox is a secondary, and then I'll use a different color to follow my next food chain. Let me just use, let's say, blue here, and so I might go to my grasshopper, he's a primary, I might go up to the mouse to be a secondary, and then I might go up to the fox to be a tertiary. So if I follow every food chain through, I'll figure out every classification for those organisms. So that's usually what I recommend, is use multiple colored markers or crayons to follow through and make sure you get every classification for every organism, because this could be a trick question on a test.